last week, we saw that the status of the Jews in the early medieval world was not this wonderful, happy kind of, we live with the Jews, we tolerate the Jews, and that's all good. And it suddenly changed at the time of the Crusades. In fact, we saw that there was a great deal of opposition to Jews. We saw that there was a certain fear of Jews. We saw from Paul that there was a concern that Jews could contaminate Christianity. Paul didn't actually talk about Jews, but he talked about people who were really both Jews and Christians. But by the time we reached Agobard of Lyon, you may recall, in the 9th century, and John Chrysostom even before that in the 4th, the Jews were the ones who threatened Christian faith. They threatened to ruin the single loaf, though we were many, unus panis multisumus. Now, someone asked toward the end of the session, they said, well, was there a spark to the Crusades? And the answer is yes and no. That is, there was no, we can't say suddenly, why did everybody suddenly come and attack the Jews? That seems to be something that remains and will ultimately remain a mystery. But we do know that there was a speech in the year 1095 in the city of Clermont in south central France by Pope Urban II, himself a Frenchman, in which he called to avenge the Muslim takeover, the Saracen takeover, as it was called, of the Holy Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And he called on people and he created an amazing response. The amazing response was very likely because Europe itself was growing. There was a surplus of nobility. You know, today we all grow up and we say, okay, we're grown up, we're going to get married, we're going to have a family. Not in those days, not if you were a noble. If you were a noble, only the oldest brother got married because the lands had to be kept intact. What a wonderful thing. Let's go east. It belongs to the Muslims. The Muslims are rebels against God. They're active enemies against us, as Pope Alexander II said in the year 1065. Let's go out and conquer them and conquer the holy city, which eventually they did in the year 1099. That's another story because they just burnt everything down. But why? Why did such a thing like that happen? Well, the fact of the matter is that we have to understand there were two crusading armies. One was an official army. It was led by a bishop, Ademar de Puy, and he maintained discipline throughout the whole thing. This was the official army of nobles, organized, and they were pretty good, except that Ademar died right before in Antioch in Syria, and then the army went crazy. It lost its leadership, and when it got to Jerusalem, it destroyed everything, absolutely everything, including, of course, the Jews who were living there. That said, that doesn't explain why the attack on the Jews. Now, Brurier, can you give us the picture of the Jew of Burj? Brurier? Oh, there we go. All right. Now, what I want you to see in this picture is a replica of one of the oldest libels against Jews. And what this libel says is that you have here a father, a Jewish father, who has taken his son. The son has, in various versions, said, I'm going to be baptized, or I've been baptized, or I've taken the Eucharist. And the father takes the child and throws him into a furnace. Now, what do you throw in the furnace? You throw bread in a furnace, right? To cook. So the thing takes on Eucharistic symbolism. Does the child die? No, because you see, there is hiding in some of the versions the child's mother, who will later convert and become a Christian, but there is the Virgin Mary, the Queen, sitting there in the back, and she will get the child out of the furnace. She will save him, and he will, of course, become a Christian. But we're talking about the Jews. Think of all the symbolism coming together here. The Jews threaten the church. Jews will not let their children convert to become Christians. Jews are too stubborn. They're too obdurate. They're impossible and therefore we cannot live with it. That's one thing. But also there's the notion that somehow through the Jew comes salvation. So it's a mixed message, isn't it? They can be saved, and at the same time they threaten, and not only that, but they're willing to kill their own. And we're going to see this motif at the very end of the talk today. If I get to it, I'm going to show you this motif in the 18th century in motion, in real motion. Now, that leads us into the text of Shlomo Bar Shimshon, which we saw last week, and we're going to see another small snippet of it this week. And this is a very complex text. As we saw, it comes from somewhere in the middle of the 12th century, which is 50 years after the events. And that means that it's not a contemporary, but somebody who's had a chance to reflect. And we also remember this is a medieval chronicle who's not interested, which is not interested in telling you how things really happened, as one German historian put it, as things really happened. They're interested in telling us ideals and thoughts and so on. And here we get to the section in Shlomo Bar Shimshon. I imagine that most of you have this text, or it's being shown to you. And we see that on the new moon of Sivan, which means right before Shavuot, remember that, right before the Torah is given, Count Emicho, the oppressor of the Jews, may his bones be ground to dust, arrived in the city of Mainz with a horde of errant ones and peasants. Actually, he didn't arrive with a horde. We know a great deal about this person. He came from only about 20 miles, 30 kilometers away from Mainz. They were used to believe that he came from the south and came north and was attacking Jews, but that's not true. He came from right around. And he became the leader of the hordes and concocted a tale that an apostle of the crucified one had come to him and made a sign of flesh on him, so that when he arrived in Italia of Yavan, Greece, Jesus, would appear and place the kingly crown on his head. Now, this is an amazing story, if you think. This is the kind of, this is how the Jew sees it, but in fact, Christian chroniclers also see it. They see it in a different way, and they do not see it positively. Emicho is a hated character by Christian chroniclers. Who is this person who comes at the head of a crowd of people and unorganized people who are not nobles, people who are not an organized army, the people who are uncontrollable, essentially. And we get pictures in the Latin chroniclers of Emicho carousing and Emicho acting not the way a noble should act. He lacked generositas, they said, which means nobility. He lacked magnanimity, which was a quality ascribed to nobles, especially in the chansons de geste, the literature of the time, like Roland and Alcide, which have a great Hebrew hero. And he's just the opposite of all this. Why? Why is he the opposite of all this? Because he comes at a time when discipline is needed, and instead of discipline, he creates mayhem. He creates strife. He kills indiscriminately. It used to be thought that they were trying to convert the Jews. They weren't. They were trying to kill the Jews. There is no question about that. They were in drunken stupor. They decided one night, let's go and kill the Jews. If we look at the text, we see that the Jews go on here. They go to the bishop of the city, Rutar, and it says they bribed him. Now, we have to be careful when it says they bribed him, because it's a monetary payment. In the medieval world, in the early modern world, justice came with payments. It was a service, it was paid for. It still is, except that we don't really think of it in that way. You want to apply for a license for something, you have to pay, right? You want to register your car, you have to pay. Well, that's what they're talking about here. And they offered him a good deal of money, and he said, okay, I'll protect you and the local count and protect. Why is this? Well, there's a tradition. And this is very important because this is the change when we talked about destabilizing coexistence. This is the tradition. In the centuries before the Crusades, in the 10th and the 11th and the 11th century, we find canon law coming together, ecclesiastical thought coming together and saying, well, the Jews are all in error, but it's very clear that we're supposed to live with Jews. The Jews are created in the image of God. That's what's said. And therefore, we cannot attack them. What is more, we cannot force them to stop being Jews. And therefore, we must, we can't convert people by force because people have a right to choose what they want. And mostly because if they're forced, they're going to come back. We'll come back to their coming back. And that bothers them more than anything else. So Emicho here, he comes in, you have the bishop says, I'm going to protect you. But of course, what happens is the Emicho rushes, the town people open the gates to them, and they come rushing in. Now, who the town people are, we don't know. People speculate all this like mad, but and someone just asked how many people. Well, the chronicler tells us thousands of people. In fact, and we'll get to this also toward the end, there are about 600 people who died, which was probably at least 60–70% of the Jews in the town. Okay, that's the largest settlement. That's an important question to answer right here. The townspeople, whoever they are, they open the gate. Well, the Jews, what do? Don't think that the Jews are passive. They have armor, they have weapons, they know what to do. The only thing is that Shlomo Bar Shimshon, or whoever these people are that create Shlomo Bar Shimshon, said, well, wait a minute, we were fasting and praying so much. That's not good. We have to have a balance on this thing. And the people begin to be slaughtered. Now look at the name with a Rabbi Kalonymus at their head and Rabbi Meshulam. The Kalonymus were the family of the Rhineland. They came from Italy. We read that in the 10th century, Kalonymus of Lucca went from Mainz to the Rhineland, to Worms, to the city of Worms or Mainz. And I always would ask students in class, well, did he take Alitalia or Lufthansa? The answer is, and this is very important, that the only way properly, if Bruria, can we pull up that map for just a second? You see the map here. You see Lucca? Bruria, can you point to Lucca here in Florence? Above where it says Lucca, Florence, Lucca. There we go. Okay, Bruria, it's great, your Italian geography. Now, what they did was, you see Pavia? They went over the mountains, the coastal mountains to Pavia, and then over the Alps. Now, the Alps are there and they're really hard, but there's a pass called the St. Bernard, which is 2,500 meters, which is incredibly easy. And it's open all winter long, as a matter of fact. And you go up and you go down. And when you go down, where are you? Lake Le Mans, which you may know better as Lake Geneva. And from there, you can just go down what's called the Rhone River. You see the river to Lyon and up and so on. And so that's why is it important? They couldn't go by sea. There were pirates. But what happens is that they're spreading culture from Italy all the way into the Rhineland. And many of you may say, are there Italian Jews? Well, if they're Italian Jews, they must be Sfardim. No, they're not. They're Italian Jews. They're Italkin. The rite is different. And in fact, the Ashkenazi rite is really a derivative of the Italian rite, much as a surprise. I presume that many of the people participating are Ashkenazim. You may go to synagogue. You may know the melodies. If you go to the main synagogue in Rome, apart from the acoustics, which they designed it to be bad acoustics, and you listen to the tefillot, you will follow them. The melodies will be different. You will follow them. If you go to a Mizrahi synagogue, the chances are you're going to have a lot of trouble. The Sidur will be very close, but you're going to have trouble following. So you have a unity of culture. And why am I bringing up this culture, the Kalonymus culture? Because, and it was something that was recognized, Rabbenu Tam himself in the 12th century said, our culture comes ki mi bari. Yatzat Torah. Bari, of course, is a city near the boot of Italy and the heel of Italy. And so they had a recognition of this. The question is, what happened to these people? They said prayer, tefillah, tshuva, tzedakah, and it didn't work. So when we put on our weapons, we couldn't fight. There was criticism. And not only that, but Brewery, let's go back to Shlomo Bar Shimshon. If we go back to that, we see something. What do the people of the Holy Covenant do at that point? Where they saw the great multitude and the vast horde of them as the sand upon the seashore. They clung to their Creator. They donned their no. I want to go down one more, and to where they start slaughtering themselves. They couldn't do anything. The bishop people couldn't help them. There were just too many. They declared willingly and wholeheartedly, after all things, there is no questioning of the ways of the Holy One. He's commanded us to allow ourselves to be killed and slain in witness of the oneness of his holy name. Happy we will be if we fulfill his commandments. And they proceed then not only to slaughter themselves, but as though it is it's Akedat Yitzchak. Anyone possessing a knife should examine it to see if it is not defective, in other words, that it's kosher for slaughtering, and let them proceed to slaughter us in sanctification of the unique and eternal one, then slaying himself, either cutting his throat, shchita, or thrusting the knife into his stomach. I can't explain that. Why thrusting one's knife into the stomach in the way of harakiri would qualify here. But the point is that you have created in this situation an amazing picture of Jews slaughtering themselves, willingly slaughtering themselves, and in doing this, they are creating a new image and a new myth. Now, this is really something very, very important to think about. Which comes first, the actual slaughter or the story about the slaughter? And it's most likely that what comes first is the story about the slaughter. That is, many Jews clearly committed, killed themselves, died for Kiddush Hashem, and as it came to be called, and held it up as an ideal. But there are a lot of questions about this. Why did it have to happen? Why did the leadership have to happen? And then in a few minutes, we'll get back to one of the results of that questioning. But for Christians, of course, on the other side of the fence, they're saying what's going on here. But even more than that, there's another problem. The problem is all the Jews who converted. Now, Shlomo Bar Shimshon tries to hide the business of the conversions, to be sure. He tries to make it look like there aren't that many, but there were. And yet he does talk about them with a text which you don't have here. He says, how sweet, he wrote, it is to sing the praise of the forcibly baptized. Whatever they ate and drank, as the law commands, was a source of concern. They ritually slaughtered their meat and foraged the fat, that is nikur, and examined it following the prescriptions of the sages. They drank no unkosher wine, nor did they visit the house of profanation, the church, of course, except rarely, occasionally. For whenever they did go, they were forced to go from fear and with a brooding soul. And the Goyim themselves knew it, that the Jews had not converted wholeheartedly, but out of terror. And before the Goyim's very eyes, these Jews observed the Shabbat as prescribed. Who speaks evil of these people, it is though he speaks evil to the aspect of God's Spirit, the Shekhinah. Now, think about this passage. This is a statement which will carry the Jews through the entire Middle Ages. That is, there are Jews who are converted, who've been forcibly converted, and they're going back. They're going back from the conversion to Judaism, and this is very worrisome. It's incredibly worrisome. It's worrisome for the Jewish community, because to a certain extent, the Jews don't know who converted and who came back seriously, or who came back back and forth. And of course, if we think ahead to the early modern period and the people who were forcibly converted in Spain and in Portugal, and their wavering going back and forth, this created a problem for everybody that one can imagine. But in the Middle Ages already, at the time of the Crusade, it's a problem. Can we let people go back? Why? Because if you recall, I mentioned so briefly Visigothic Spain in the 7th century, where the Visigothic rulers, minority rulers, did everything they could to convert the Jews. And they forced them to convert, and then, of course, the Jews reverted. And the church councils were forced to come and make a decision about how to handle this kind of thing in Spain, in the city of Toledo, and they're known as the Toledan Councils. And they said that on the one hand, it shouldn't have happened. On the other hand, if it did happen, and the person doesn't somehow or other renounce the baptism within a very, very brief time, quia constat in Latin, it's obvious that they've become Christians and they must remain Christians. This is the problem that threatens Christianity with the Jews for the rest of the Middle Ages. This is the central problem. It's not the blood libels. They'll be attached to it, of course, and other such accusations. It's the fact that the Jews are spawning renegades, people who can pollute by being of the type, something that I think I mentioned, called lapsi, people who, priests who went and participated in pagan sacrifice and then came back to offer the Eucharist. These people polluted. They took this image and they applied it to the Jews. You can't participate in Jewish ritual. If you do it and come back, you somehow or other pollute the Eucharist. And this is exactly the kind of image and the kind of feeling that we're going to get throughout the Middle Ages. How are these people to be dealt with? Now, I would like to go from here back to the texts that we saw last week at Brewery. I hope we still have them. It says Glaber, Werner, and Rupert. Glaber we saw. This was before the Crusades, this incipient stuff. But let's look at Rupert of Deutz. Do we have that, Gloria?
I don't have it on me right here with me.
All right,
if you want,
well,
I can look for it.
That's okay. I'll read it. It's a short thing. Rupert is a monk, and he's in the 12th century, and he says, though even the Lamia, which is kind of a female demon, it's actually kind of a hyena, bears her breasts to feed her pups. The daughter of my people is cruel like the ostrich. The Lamia is a monstrous animal. Its name means tearing, yet it has a natural affection towards its young and feeds them. But the daughter of my people is very cruel and has not bared her breast like the ostrich that scatters its eggs in the desert. Of course, the daughter of my people, he means Jews, but which Jews? He means converts. On top of that, she says it, she killed it saying his blood is on us. Ah, there's the Jew of Burj. Now, I mentioned that's an old image. The Jew of Burj image, what we saw, became, wonderful. The Jew of Burj image simply spread all over the place. You find it in the most amazing places that you can imagine. You find it in something called the Cantigas de Santa Maria, which were written in Rioja, in the heart of Spain. It just doesn't go away. The Jew kills his offspring, her offspring, in order to avoid conversion. And that's, or in this case, it's the Eucharist. Hence, she kills it. His blood is upon us. Hence, in other words, the child, as in the story of Ruth, becomes Eucharistic, a symbol of Christ. Hence, from then until today, the tongue of the nursing infant clings to its palate, and there's no one to break bread for the children who are asking it. They have too much hunger and thirst to hear the word of God, not because they want the word of God, but because they, the mothers, prefer the children to perish rather than to break for themselves the bread of the scriptures that they might otherwise have and spiritual understanding. Well, this is the perception of Jews, and this is in monastic circles. we have a real problem. But let's go down, let's go back, I guess, Gloria, to where the text that says Werner. There we go. Now, who is Werner? Werner is some 13th century Werner of Oberwest. Werner is a child who is said to have been killed in hatred of the faith. Hatred of the faith is a term one finds odium fidei all over, whenever it's associated continuously with ritual murder. It doesn't mean hate. It means the opposite of the favor of the faith, things that work for the faith. He is killed to destroy the faith, to contaminate the faith, to ruin the faith, to keep the faithful from reaching salvation, is what this means when we look at Werner here. And the Jews kill this Werner, supposedly, and it says, let's look at this together. This is rather amazing, what the ritual murder victim symbolizes. And I should say, the charges of Jews killing Christians begin around the year 1144. Actually, the story is much later. William of Norwich, maybe you've heard of it. It's all made up. It's all an incredible story, of course, but it spreads like wildfire. And by the year 1200, it's all over the place. The Jews do this. This is a bit later from Werner. Werner suffers, it is said, in place of Christ, local priesthood. For since the Jews could not have the corpus verum is the Eucharist, the true body of Christ. That means the Eucharist. They took their wrath out on Werner, the corpus mysticum. The mystical body is the entire church. The entire church is equal, co-equal to Christ, because we are one loaf, though we are many. Werner suffered too as Christ, in Christ. Now this is getting more interesting. For the blessed child was made part of Christ's body. Werner also suffered for Christ. Now, this one is really amazing. Think about this for a second. Pro Christo. What do you mean for Christ? Somehow Werner's death, the death of Christian martyrs, becomes something desired because Christian martyrs actually promote the work of Christ and the salvation of Christ on this earth. And it goes on, since the Jews could not lay their hands on Christ reigning in heaven, they persecuted his Christian devotee. He suffered for Christ, for just as Christ underwent the passion so that the Christian could be saved, so Werner underwent the passion for Christ's benefit, propter Christum, Christ's benefit, so that faith be exalted. Well, we have not only converts who are going back, who are feared, but the notion that Jews will kill any Christian to keep the faith going. So you see where the two myths merge: to kill their own to prevent salvation, to damage the Eucharist, to damage the church directly by killing people like Werner, and you create really a ferocious image of what could happen to the Jew. And at this point, we have to say ourselves the simple question, well, why is it that the Jews were not all killed? Why is it the Jews were not all destroyed? Let us see why that happened. Is this official doctrine of the church or not official doctrine of the church? It's not official doctrine. Brewer, can we go to Innocent III, the Constitution for the Jews? I think now we're in order or something. Yes. All right. Now, this is the most famous papal letter of all time dealing with Jews. You see the title Sicut iudaeis, it should be Sicut iudaeis, known to be more properly. This is called the incipit, the beginning, the first three words of a papal letter. It's as simple as all that. And Innocent III, probably the most powerful pope of all time, who certainly is no friend of the Jews. And please, let's not talk about popes who were friendly and unfriendly. No pope was friendly, no pope was unfriendly. They were applying canon law and the principles of the church. It's the same thing where we talk about, oh, someone did this out of hatred or being anti-Jewish. We shouldn't use those terms. Maybe they did hate, maybe they were against the Jews, but they did it out of a belief that they were promoting Christianity. And if you don't understand that, if you don't make the effort to understand these things, you can't really understand what the motivation is and find out how to fight against it. If you just say it's hatred, you're lost. And it's not good historical research anyway. Well, the Pope begins and he says, although in many ways the disbelief of the Jews must be reproved, you must speak badly of it, since nevertheless through them our faith is truly proved, they must not be oppressed grievously by the faithful, as the prophet says, do not slay them, lest these be forgetful of thy law. In other words, the Jewish scripture testifies to the truth of Christianity, which we know is a typical claim of Christianity to have succeeded Judaism. As if he were saying more openly, do not wipe out the Jews completely, lest perhaps Christians might be able to forget thy law, and so on. Now, this is what's called the opening, the proemium of a papal letter. All too often, people look at these things and they think it's the whole letter. Actually, it's not even any of the letter. It's only an opening, a justification, and usually it begins, if it's going to be privileges, it begins saying, we're really not supposed to privilege the Jews, but look, we have to do it, we're obligated to do it. And that's what this one says. If you get another letter, and there are many to begin, the Jews have to be preserved. It then goes on to say, yeah, but they've been bad by our standards, and therefore we have to repress them. But we're going to see a letter like that in just a moment. So you have to be very careful with these openings. And all too often, people who've read these letters, they don't understand how the letter is constructed. Papal letters are constructed, the opening, and then the actio, the acts, the things which really count in the letter. And then there's a clause of penalty, and then there's a clause of dating. So the acts go here. Just as there ought to be not license for the Jews to presume to go beyond what is permitted them by law in their synagogues, so in those which have been conceded them, they ought to be suffered no prejudice. Now, you may recall from the letter of Gregory the Great that he said exactly that. The Pope is, like a good diplomat. He goes, good judge, I'm going to look for precedents. So he finds a precedent. And the precedent he finds is this thing in Gregory the Great. Now, what does that mean, right? That's a very nice thing. But only now is it being fleshed out. And mind you, until the end of the 12th century, there was nothing quite like this letter. Historians have looked at this letter and say, this is the essence of Jewish law for the Jews by the popes. And in fact, that's a very bad error. The church has a body of law, and that body of law had been growing over the centuries. We've had a chance to refer to it over these two talks. And as this law developed and became crystallized, things got put into it that stayed there, and they're going to be here. In the year 1234, a man named Raymond of Peñaforte took all this material and edited it together and made what is called the code, not the code, but the body of law, of canon law. And that's what really governs the Jews. And this letter will be edited and put into the canons. And indeed, it will begin with the phrase that we began with here. And this is very important. These are permanent laws, permanent regulations. They're not simply something that a pope gave or didn't give or repeated. They were repeated. This was repeated for emphasis, but only that. And he says, just they should serve. Therefore, men have to know that the Jews have to be properly cared for. And we look at our predecessors. Calixtus Eugene, this is from the middle of the 12th century and so on and so forth. But in fact, it's only from the last two that we have a text which resembles this, and we have to follow their way. Now, what is, we go down a little bit, will you please? All right. No Christian may compel them, unwilling or refusing by violence to come to baptism. So that's prohibited. Anyone should spontaneously fly to the Christians. Once his choice has become evident, let him be made a Christian without calumny. He's not to be considered to possess the true faith, who is recognized to have come to baptism, not spontaneously, but unwillingly. Okay? But the question is, what is unwilling? And 3 years after, somebody said to the Pope, what is unwilling? And he made a very fine distinction. He said, those who didn't resist, who may have even been asleep, baptism works in their case. It's only if they're actively resisting. In other words, I come to you, I have a sword in my hand, and I say, you're going to be baptized or not. And you look at that sword and you say, no, that's what's called absolute refusal. And that's true force. And that is the only way that you can get out of staying a Christian. In other words, they're making life hard, but they're still making a rule. You can't do it by force. So the Pope then goes on, and you see there are rights. No Christian ought to presume, apart from the juridical sentence of the territorial power, wickedly to injure their persons or to do violence to them or anything like that. In the next paragraph, no one ought to disturb them in their own festivals with clubs or injure them and so on. No one is to destroy a Jewish cemetery, and this is important. Now, what's important about this text, among other things, is that it's very similar to the kind of charter that local rulers, emperors, bishops were giving to the Jews at all times. And I think that the origin of this particular text actually was the Jews of Rome who went to the Pope. There were many of them. And the Jews also had some real protection in Rome by being allied with noble families. And they said, we need some protection. And the Pope said, okay, I will give this letter. And this letter is very good because it says you can't baptize Jews by force. You have to let them have their synagogues. You have to let them have their rights and so on. This is the big contra, the big counter to all the pressure that's going on. And Jews will use this and refer to this. However, at the very end of this decree, can we go down? You see, if anyone shall attempt against the tenor of this decree to go against it, let him be punished by the vengeance of excommunication, unless he is correct about this. Now, what's interesting about this? It seems like he means Christians, but he also means Jews. He says he means that if Jews don't observe what's in the letter, if Jews do not behave properly according to Christian law, if Jews do not accept what the church has decreed, then the church has a right to remove their rights, their privileges, and so on. The only thing it can't do is force them to convert. This, to me, seems to be something that comes out of Roman law way back, which says that Jews shouldn't be disturbed as Jews, but if they misbehave, then indeed they will be punished. So everything is on sort of conditional, and life for the Jews isn't going to be easy, especially when the same Pope then comes along and says 10 years later, all Jews have to wear special clothing. Now, people make a great deal out of this thing. It's an innovation, but not an innovation. It's the same kind of law and obligation that the popes were pushing for all along. Be careful of the Jews. Be careful of the Jews. There is this theme that just runs along, and there's simply no way to escape. So that even when the church protects the Jews, it's on condition. And how do we know that my interpretation is correct? We know it because we go to another text called, oddly, the 1007 Anonymous. Now, it's simply the name of a short text of about 600 or 700 words on which I've written a whole book. It's a text which is a fiction. It was created in the 13th century. It begins with an attack on the Jews by a king, the King of France, who was aided by the Duke of Normandy, and supposedly in the year 1007. Well, in the year 1007, that's rather improbable, because some of you may know the Duke of Normandy in the year 1007 was really the English king, or about to be the English king, and somebody completely detached from the king of France. And in fact, Jews got into England because William the Conqueror from Normandy went and conquered England, and he brought some Jews over there with him. Before that, there were no Jews in England. Well, this is a text, as I say, it's a fiction. It's built on all kinds of stories. I won't start because we will finish sometime around tomorrow afternoon in a year. I just want to show you this little thing. What happens is the a Jew is threatened by the Duke, and the king, the Jew says to the Duke, "No, it's not for you to decide whether I should convert. It's up to the Duke wants to force him, whether it's up to the Pope." And for various reasons, the Duke says, "Okay, you go to the Pope." The king, the Jew goes to the Pope, and he says to him, "I have a secret to tell you." Now, some of you who know the Bible, Ehud ben Gera, where's the book? Someone asked. Thank you for the excuse to show you the book. It's called Levi's. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Levi's Vindication. It's a very technical book. It's not easy to read, but it's satisfying, I believe. He goes to the Pope and he says, "I have a secret to tell you. I have a secret to tell you." Ehud ben Gera, Ehud, the judge, takes Eglon Melech HaMoav to an attic and he slays him with a double-edged sword. What does the 1007 tell the Pope? "I have found none save God who stands above you as a ruler of the lands of the nations." This is a title. The Pope is the king of the nations, strictly 13th century. "For you are the head of the nations and the ruler over them. So I came to cry out about my ills from the Jews who live under your jurisdiction." The Jews are under the rule of the Pope. "For evil men have arisen without your sanction, and they have attacked the Jews, using them, forcing them to become Christians." And the Pope says, "Oh, this is no good." And he cites this text, Sicut iudaeis, that I just studied with you. And the Jew turns to the Duke of Normandy. The Jew is called Yaakov ben Yekutiel. It's a fictitious name. He says, "You, the Duke, do not have the governance over the Jews to make them leave the Torah. That belongs only to the Pope of Rome." So he tells it once to the Pope and once to the ruler in opposite sides. It's literary, so it's really the same thing. What is he saying? Because he says the Pope is not easy. The Pope wants to judge our literature, which by then they'd started to burn the Talmud, you recall. Innocent III had said Jews live in perpetual servitude. It doesn't mean slavery. It means that the Jews have to observe all the canons. The Jews have to be second rate. And yet here you have a Jew coming and saying, "You know what? We have to accept this. This is the best we can get." Kings are arbitrary. And by the 13th century, when this was written, we knew very well that kings were arbitrary. Kings had expelled Jews. Kings had canceled loans at interest. Kings had done all kinds of terrible things, and we're going to do terrible things to the Jews. Our only hope is in the papacy. Now look at this situation that the Jews are in. It's absolutely, unbearable. They're not being forced to convert, yet they are being forced to convert. They're under suspicion. They're thought that people will kill their children rather than let them convert. And yet they're also protected. But what are the limits of that protection? And is that limits of that protection going to slide and slide and slide as time goes by, as in fact, that's exactly going to happen? And also, if you do convert, just what happens to you? I would like to go to the text, Maestro Andrea, Jacob of Venice. We don't really know too much about Jacob of Venice at all. Another character who may be real, who may not be real. There's a great deal of dispute. But one thing he does is he writes a letter. It's somebody named Jacob who converted, and it was known as Maestro Andrea. But they were always suspicious of him. He said, "I was seduced by all kinds of wonderful hopes." And in fact, in all the conversionary literature, there are tropes that come back. They tell a woman, "Oh, if you convert, you will be married to the greatest person, and fine ladies will come and put you in a fine dress and take you to ceremonies and to a wedding." It's a trope. It just keeps coming on and on again. So that's what they induced him with. And he said, "You will look around you. People from every part will come before you. One will say, 'Take good care of your comings and goings.' And another, 'May your coming be a blessing.' A third, however, will say, 'You have what you have begun, finish.' A fourth, 'Be on guard for your soul.' A fifth, 'Be on the watch not to ruin your reputation among us.' A sixth, 'Be strong in a man.' A seventh, 'If you are false to our Torah, you will pay with your life." And so on and so forth. You can read this thing. Being a convert is no happy situation at all. And that, of course, is going to happen as time goes over the years. So here I've created a kind of situation very, very briefly. We have a little bit more to go. In which being a Jew in this world is not a very easy thing. How do Jews react? How do they protect themselves? But first, before I get to that, I do want to go to a thing. I promised myself that I wouldn't do it, but I am. There's an end to the story of the forced baptisms of the fear. By the time you get to the 18th century, there's a feeling that women, if they're pregnant and their child is denounced, what does that mean? Offered is the word they use. That say, I have a brother and the brother converts, and I'm married and my wife is pregnant. The brother can offer my future child to the church. And that happens in the 18th century. They would take a woman, lock her up in what they called the house of converts. This was in Rome in the 18th century. And they would keep her there for the fear that if they didn't, she would either abort or kill the child as soon as it was born. It's amazing how a myth like that can grow over time. Really, really amazing how a myth like that can grow over time. There were also young women who were captured and taken into the house of converts, and they were kept there for a number of days, sometimes 40 days, depending, sometimes 12. And we have the diary of one such girl. We know she was real. You know, we have a record in the census of her birth. She got out and she wrote a diary, which was then redone. And it's translated from the Italian in this book, Anna and Tranquillo. Tranquillo is her brother who wrote the thing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't plug myself, but it's an amazing story. You can read the diary and everything that goes on, and then all the implications. The implications are many. I won't go into them. I have 2 minutes left to talk because I do want to have questions. What happens in the Rhineland? Well, remember I talked about the Kalonymus family. And I said, why did I take the time to talk about it? Because the Kalonymus family was in disgrace. They didn't save the Jews. They said, go pray, when they should have been practicing their weapons skills. They should have been eating some steaks or something, or whatever they were eating, in order to be strong when they were attacked. And so they decided to do tshuva in a true sense. And they said that, they sort of kind of pulled away from the leadership and formed a group called the Hasidei Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with the Hasidim of the Besh, nothing at all. You can find some ideas in common, but institutionally or any other way, nothing at all. And what they say, and I can't read the text with you. I don't have the time to read the text with you. I'm sorry, but do go and read this marvelous text. It's the next one of introduction of Eleazar of Worms, Harokeach, to Sefer Hasidim. What he tells us is that somehow or other we didn't know, and we didn't know because we didn't listen. And if we had listened, it was our job to reprove people. And they develop a whole series of pietism of how to behave. Yes, we do have proof of the question, Ruth the Eastman. We absolutely have proof, believe me. And I can give you 23 examples of it actually happening within a 5-year period. The Hasidei Ashkenaz become a sect. They become a source of enormous interest, and I'm raising them in particular. In particular, I'm raising it because they are kind of mythical in the Middle Ages. Ivan Marcus, Chaim Soloveitchik have written a great deal about it, and I urge you to go and look at it because it was one reaction. We can react and save ourselves by somehow or other becoming leaders that save our people. They also went east, the Hasidei Ashkenaz, and clearly operated as a major force of ethics and so on and so forth as time went on. Okay, I see there are many questions being come up. The last thing I wanted to show you was something that as an offshoot of all this work is the table called the families in Mainz. The families in Mainz, it's a table based on some statistical analysis. We won't go into that, but you may wonder, well, what were these families? People were killing themselves by families. And there's something about that. If you go to the Pinchas Synagogue in Prague today, you will see on the wall 60,000 names. People, of course, who were perished during the Shoah, all listed by families. I spent a Yom Kippur there, and I can tell you it's an amazing experience just watching it. Anyway, what the amazing thing is that the families of the Jews, you may think they were large like today, they weren't. They had under 2 children average per family. So we're talking about very tight-knit families, families that were effective, as we know, families where women had a great deal more say than today. And that's the Jewish world that I can't even begin to go into. And I think that my time is more than up. And I know there were a lot of questions. People were, I opened up issues and they wanted to go on, but we got just a short period of time till Tamar pulls down the guillotine.
No, I'm going to try help you out with the questions. If you don't hear me well, so tell me and I'll stop, because I know it wasn't working before. So first of all, thank you very much. I think it's a fascinating times, and we do have plenty of questions. How did the Crusaders slaughter village after village if these laws existed to protect the Jews?
If who existed?
If the laws existed in order to protect the Jews, how did the Crusaders go and slaughter village after village?
Yeah, I have a cynical answer to that. You ever run a red light? Because the laws said yes, and according to Shlomo Bar Shimshon, he said, well, the bishop at first said he tried, but he couldn't, and his soldiers, they just gave up. We're not going to die for the Jews, or whatever reason you may have. It's just, it's just one of these things. So we say, I mean, look, we tell the Hamas, don't send balloons into Israel. They still send them, don't they? Yeah. So, I mean, people break laws all the time. They walk out of the airport without getting tested. It's in the nature of living in Israel. So the answer is that they're ideals and they're realities, and one has to juggle between the ideal and the reality. Oh, geez, somebody asked, what's the best book? You know what I'm going to do.
Show your book.
Of course, Alienated Minority, which that's.
It's fine. People are here to hear you, so they must be enjoying themselves. And there were a few questions at books. But Sandra actually asked another question, which I would like to answer. She asked if we could maybe speak about medieval women. So I want to point out that now we're sort of preparing for Tisha B'Av, and soon we'll be moving over to Tu B'Av, celebrating love. So July 21st, Professor Elisheva Baumgarten will be speaking to us about marriage and marriage contracts and women in medieval times. So that's a different story.
No, don't miss those lectures. She's the expert.
She's great, and we'll be putting up the link, and you can sign up to get a reminder to come to that talk. Okay, let's see. William is asking if there are any examples of those who came to the aid of the Jews during this period, like Hasidei Olam. That is a real problem, because the text keeps saying the Jews were betrayed by their makarim, which is often translated as friends. It's probably not friends, it's business partners. And the Jews looked for help. The fact of the matter is that in this time, there really are not many people who are going to help the Jews. It's hard to say. What gave them help? There is a bishop of Cosmos of Prague. Now, the attacks are just in the Rhineland, basically. Some of them go a little further east, some a little further north, but it's just one small segment of medieval Jewry at this time. It's just that it left such a memory, and it's so recorded. So
he said, this is terrible that Jews are being forced to convert. The Emperor Henry IV, who had had plenty of problems with the church in the years before, he came along and said, hey, no, the Jews can go back to Judaism. Nobody could stop it during these attacks. Well, I shouldn't really say that, because we know that there are three towns in the Rhineland: Speyer, Worms, and Mainz. They're all very close to each other. I hardly recommend, when it's possible, to take a trip down the Rhine River to that area. It's absolutely, that's where all the Wagnerian operas come from, the Rheingau, the Rhine Valley, and so on and so forth. It's magnificent territory. In Speyer, they say that the bishop protected them. Now remember, these are these chronicles. We have no reason to believe absolutely everything in these chronicles is correct, or anything is correct technically. But the bishop protected them, it said. So maybe some bishops were able to do it. Maybe some weren't. Why in Mainz? Well, it could be that if we listen to the Emicho stories, that Emicho came, he's a noble, he's powerful, he gets drunk with all these people, he takes their advice, and he goes and attacks. And the Christian chroniclers, I mean, had I had time, I wrote a long article on this once. The Christian chroniclers, when they talk about Emicho, they hate him more than the Jews do. They hate him because he created all these apostates, and there's nothing worse in the church than apostates. He behaved unbefitting a noble, and he broke church discipline. He created this is a time, the end of the 11th century, when the church is really getting its house together and really trying to run itself and not be run by outside forces. Up to this time, the local noble nominated the bishop. In the year 1073, the Pope will be known as Gregory VII, says nothing doing, and there's a huge fight with the person who's called the emperor. He's not an emperor in the way we think of a real emperor. And there's a big fight. If you were studying medieval history, you'd have to spend, of course, you have to spend a week or two on this. And he just says, well, the Jews can go back. And it's even assumed by one of the popes that Jews can go back. But during the time itself, I don't think we can imagine Jews being really helped. There was not mayhem. It probably more mayhem than during the Nazi era because of the way the Nazis behaved, their crazy discipline.
Okay, and going back to a question from Evelyn. How were Jews treated in England when Richard the Lionheart set off for Jerusalem? Was Robin Hood a friend of the Jews?
I would not know if Robin Hood. I suspect he wouldn't have been, to tell you the truth, if there really was a Robin Hood. Now, listen, Richard. The story of the Jews in England is a very special story. It's a very special group of people, small people, a lot of very, very wealthy Jews, and it created a lot of enmity. But England, everything is unique. And I advise everybody to go to the city of Caen, that's in the north, in Normandy, and see the Bayeux Tapestry, which recounts the whole conquest by William. It's like a comic strip. It's about 40 meters long. And the best one of the slides, it said they came to forage off of the land, but the wine they brought with them from France. Uh-oh, brilliant. Tamara's frozen.
Yes, I see
Tamara?
that.
Yeah, she's
Let's
frozen.
see. A question again from Evelyn. How were the Jews that are in nowadays Israel? How were they treated during the Crusades?
How the Jews that
were living in nowadays Israel?
Or
Palestine.
That one I can answer. The ones in Hebron, I don't think they were touched, however many there were. But the ones in Jerusalem were burnt. They just burnt the entire city down. Muslims, Jews. They may have even burnt some Greek Christians, because by then there was a break in the church itself. So no, that was a disaster. And the explanation is that the bishop, Ademar de Puy, who had headed it, had died. He had kept discipline amazingly. during the whole time, but at the very end, he didn't, and it was a disaster.
Okay, so I'll just ask the one last question, and then we'll say goodbye. At what point did Jews achieve protected status in the papal states?
In the papal states, they always had it, always had it. The problem is, and that, if you want to read Anna and Tranquillo, the problem is it keeps getting whittled away. And until the 1555, the Pope Paul IV establishes a ghetto. He wants to do two things. One, keep Jews and Christians apart, and two, press the Jews by making life miserable to convert. And it's really the first time that the papacy ever really has an open and direct conversionary policy, as hard as it is to believe. They wanted it, but they didn't press it. But bit by bit, even this gets whittled down, and that's the subject of a future lesson, because I won't even try to go into it now. Just read on Tranquillo. All the answers are there. Thank everybody for participating.